Hi, everybody. This is Kara Parfit. I am the Manager of Marketing and Sales Support here at Cerdant. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar on the Aerohive Wireless Product Line capabilities. We really appreciate you taking the time out of the day. Presenting today is Cerdant Network Engineering Team Manager and Resident Wireless Expert, Sam Sexton. Sam's been with us for going on 5 years now, and as I mentioned, really drives all of our work around wireless network planning and design. He is our go-to and is building quite the network of wireless design engineers around him as well. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A box that you should see in your event controls. We will get to those questions as they come in, or we'll handle them, some of them, as Sam goes through the Q&A piece at the end of the session as well. So if we aren't able to get to your question during the webinar, we'll make sure to follow up with you individually, make sure nothing gets missed. So I don't want to steal any more of the precious time here, so I will hand things over to Sam to go ahead and get started.
Kara, thank you for that introduction. She said my name is Sam Sexton, and I'm the Manager of Network Engineering here at Cerdant. Over the next, 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to be doing a dive into Aerohive, specifically their APs and that product associated with Hivemanager. There is going to be quite a bit that we're not going to be able to get to today. It is a very robust product. It has a lot of features, a lot of feature sets. But if you'd like a deeper dive in after this webinar, do not hesitate to contact either of us, and we'll make sure to schedule a more personal one-on-one time to where we can review some different features. So for today's webinar, our main topics for today are going to be really that Cerdant Aerohive partnership. Aerohive versus others, Hivemanager and what types of Hivemanager tools there are. What makes Aerohive Aerohive? We'll then dive into our demo, and finally we'll wrap up, and like she said, we'll handle some questions. But before we get into any of that, I want to just remind all of you, and for all of those who were with us in our last wireless webinar when we did our do's and don'ts and wireless planning, that as great of a product as Aerohive is, and it is a fantastic product, it will only work if deployed properly. And depending on the size of your environment, specifically if you're in a medium-sized or larger office, it really is going to start with design. And if you'd like to take back a moment, if you didn't get to join us last time when we talked wireless do's and don'ts and we talked wireless design, please head over to our YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com, just do a search for Cerdant, our company name, and we have a channel there that actually has all of our webinars ranging from for video or reporting service to DPI SSL, as well as our wireless deployment webinar that we had. So why Cerdant and Aerohive? Well, it all started first and foremost with questions that we're getting from our customers. Now, we still will always work with SonicWall, and we still will always work with SonicPoint and SonicWaves, but on a regular basis, even if we had successful deployments with those products, which we had numerous because they are good products, a lot of our customers came to us with features that they wished the SonicPoint and SonicWave had. And a lot of these features are on the roadmap and are coming, but our customers wanted to have accessibility to them much sooner. So we started investigating other wireless solutions out there. And some of the common questions that we were getting or requests that we were getting was the ability to have better roaming. And while roaming is associated with the end user, and again, we discussed that in our previous webinar, having a wireless solution that has built-in features to help the user roam is a big key piece. Features that have additional security, different forms of authentication that you can use, or hardware security, like a TPM chip to where if somebody were to steal it, they can't gain access or information from it. Some advanced reporting tools, a centralized location to manage your products or manage your APs on a global scale, scalable deployment services so you can deploy policies at multiple locations at once, and finally the ability to handle large capacities and dense areas without having a dip in productivity. Now, we did a lot of testing. We reviewed a lot of different products, and in the end, Aerohive access points and switches were the way that we went. So what about Aerohive versus everyone else? Now, I want to put a disclaimer on this. These products that I'm also going to compare Aerohive to are good products, but these are some of the reasons on why we chose Aerohive over potentially other products. Okay, so if you use one of these products, by no means is it a slander on any of these, but these are part of the reasons why we chose Aerohive to be the main partner AP that we were adding to our portfolio. So first, when comparing to Aruba, Aruba doesn't have an optimized true dual radio 5 gigahertz option. And what that means is in most APs, you have a 2.4 gigahertz radio and a 5 gigahertz radio. Now, a lot of solutions, they lock in that 2.4, and that's all it can do. Aerohive gives you the option to change that extra 2.4 gigahertz radio to another 5 gigahertz radio running on a different channel. And this is important to handle those dense areas, those dense populous areas where you have a lot of connections. And the reason being is most of the new modern cell phones, tablets, and laptops, they only want to connect on 5 gigahertz. While you can force them to 2.4, and they will use 2.4, they're looking for 5 first and foremost. Now, if you have an AP that's half of its resources are dedicated to 2.4 and half are dedicated to 5, and everybody's connecting to 5, you have a really inefficient access point because it's the 5 gigahertz radio is being overloaded and the 2.4 gigahertz radio is doing nothing. As an Aerohive solution, you can turn both of those to 5 gigahertz, and its advanced HiveOS software is going to mitigate any one radio from being overloaded and share the load, making it a very efficient access point and giving a great user experience for your users. Aruba is the one access point we're going to talk about that actually has this as an option, but in most cases, the access point gets bogged down and it's not truly optimized. Aerohive has spent a lot of time and money researching this and getting it very fine-tuned. Aruba doesn't have a very scalable enterprise solution. Now, Aruba does have a cloud solution and they have a controller solution, but when you get to an enterprise level, they're always going to push you to a controller. Aerohive is completely controllerless no matter what size you get to. And when you move to a controller, you sometimes lose maintenance window control. We're going to discuss more of that later, but if you want to test something and only deploy, let's say, a new firmware or a new patch to one access point versus all the access points connected to that controller, you can have some issues depending on what types of changes you're making. With Aerohive, no matter how small or how large the change is, you can roll it out only to the specific access points or switches you want. You have complete control over that. Next is Meraki. Now, Meraki is a little more apples to apples because it is pure cloud solution. And again, it's a good solution, but some of the things that turned us off to Meraki is first and foremost, again, it has no dual 5 gigahertz option. Their 2.4 gigahertz radio is locked in. That's all it is. That's all it will do. So in most cases in our testing, half of our access point was sitting there dormant, not doing anything. That's resources not being used. The next big piece, and this was a big one for us, is one is no license-free option. And even in their license option, if you expire, the device ceases to operate. It basically becomes a paperweight. And we're going to discuss some of the differences with that in Aerohive. The main one being that there's a license-free option for Aerohive, and the alternate being if your license expires, you just can't make changes. The access point will continue to operate fully, a full operation, a full feature suite operation running HiveOS, even without a license or even an expired license. And finally, application database. Well, we work with SonicWall, and SonicWall has a great application database. If we ever were to deploy an access point without a SonicWall at the edge, we wanted an application database to help us filter, control bandwidth, and Aerohive has about 10 times as many applications, over about 1,200 different application signatures, allowing us to really find different types of traffic. And finally, Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti is really starting to carve out a niche for itself, and we were looking at it, but it really isn't a true enterprise cloud solution, and they don't have downtime-free channel optimization. Aerohive and some of the things we're going to talk about here shortly can seamlessly change channel power settings without any reboot, without any downtime. If you make any of those changes to Ubiquiti, it will cause downtime in your environment, so you can't have a dynamically changing environment during production. And overall, when you start to have really those large areas, those large connective areas, high-density areas, their throughput curve starts to drop faster than most, specifically that of Aerohive's. Now, to manage your devices, you're going to use something called Hivemanager, right? And while there is a cloud and on-premise Hivemanager, we're really only going to focus on the cloud piece because that's the piece that we're really associated with and that we help deploy and help manage. Now, there are two types, the first being Connect. Now, Connect is the license-free version. It offers centralized management. It offers mapping tools and a full suite of configuration tools. So you could take a license-free option, deploy your access points, and have a strong environment doing that. However, you're going to lose a lot of what makes Aerohive Aerohive by not having that select option. Most of our deployments are select, and we recommend using select because of the additional tools that you get. So Aerohive Select is the license option. You, of course, get all the features of the Connect option, but you get advanced monitoring tools. You get diagnostic tools, and you get troubleshooting tools that really are going to help you go a long way. You get that application database we talked about. Not only the visibility that you can see what types of applications are on your network, you have the ability to control them and access some advanced features. You get a guest captive web portal. If this is something that's important to you, we have a lot of our customers who really want to have a captive web portal that they can design, gather in guest data, and know what guests and who connected to their guest network. PPSK. This is a proprietary Aerohive piece that's an alternate to WPA2 PSK. It runs on the WPA2 framework, but it allows you to basically run an individual pre-shared key per employee, control how many devices they can connect, what type of access they get upon connecting. And finally, it does it all without a Radius server or Active Directory. You can just do it based on your cloud management tools. You get 24/7 support, and there's a ton more. Again, we can spend a whole day just talking about the advanced features that you get from the Select piece. So really, while there is both options, we strongly do recommend the Select because of all the tools you do get. We're going to dive into a lot of those here in a little bit. So what makes Aerohive Aerohive? The first is it is a complete controllerless management solution. Okay, it is without a controller. It's all in the cloud, and it does that through what we call Aerohive calls a cooperative control architecture, and it consists of these three planes. The first being data. Now, the data plane is all about your wireless clients. It's how they gain network access. It's how they form associations with the access point, and it basically is how they are getting their policies and they're getting control. The next is the control plane. Now, this is how Aerohive devices communicate with each other. They coordinate functions such as best path forwarding, fast roaming, and that automatic RF frequency management or radio frequency management. This is how the devices can communicate to each other and make changes based on the parameters that you put in your design. They're not going to go rogue and just do whatever they want. They're going to always work in the framework that you put in, but it allows them to have that dynamic ability to change based on the environment that you have. Something that, when comparing to Ubiquiti here in the previous slide, would cause downtime with them. The Aerohive devices do it seamlessly. And finally, the management plane. And this is where Hivemanager lives, the product we just talked about previously. It's a centralized location where you can configure, monitor, and gather all of your reporting from multiple devices. Now, Hivemanager operates solely on the management plane, and any loss of connectivity to that cloud manager, the access points gain that plane and manage themselves, continuing to run the last configuration they had. Now, if you lose internet, obviously people are going to experience some down items. But if you're using your wireless to have laptops connect and gain access to local resources, and some other cloud solutions, when you lose internet, you lose the ability to gain access to those resources. As soon as the access points lose connectivity to the Hivemanager, they continue to operate as self-sufficient devices locally on your network, allowing people to connect, allowing people to pass traffic to local resources. Obviously, you're not going to have internet because nobody has internet if you lose your connectivity. But it still makes sure that you don't lose all of production. You don't lose local resources. Now, this is all done by the neural system of Aerohive, which is these 4 cooperative control protocols. And these protocols really are the backbone of Aerohive. The first one being Aerohive Mobility Routing Protocol. Now, this is for seamless Layer 2 roaming, mesh routing, and redundancy. For those who have seen what the Aerohive Atom is, which, unfortunately, today we're not going to get too deep into, but this protocol is what makes the Aerohive Atom work and work well. It allows the ability for redundancy in your network so that if one Aero access point has, let's say, its cable cut, or it loses the ability to get to the internet, it can connect to one of its fellow access points and form a mesh system on your network to maintain connectivity for all the users in that access point zone. And this is the protocol that makes that work. Next is Dynamic Network Extensions Protocol. Now, this is for Layer 3 roaming, and it allows that seamless transition for users, and it helps users move from access point to access point and maintain their connections. Next is Identity-Based Network Extensions Protocol. This allows clients to be tunneled to selected Aerohive APs based on their login credentials or the SSID that they connect to. This also partially builds into the fact that you can run one SSID and have users connect to it and gain different VLANs, different policies, different profiles based on what type of key you input or what password you input to that singular SSID. And finally, and I consider this more of the heart and soul of Aerohive, is the Automatic Channel Selection Protocol. And this is, again, a proprietary piece of Aerohive, and it's what lets them dynamically communicate to each other, select different radio channels, different power settings, form different mesh and access points based on how they communicate with each other. This protocol lives on that control plane and grants a lot of access across all of the devices to pick and choose what they're doing, make slight manipulation and changes, but again, all based in your framework. They're never going to leave the framework that you design. And finally, and most importantly, the visibility you gain from this cloud management piece. Now, having said that, we're going to take a moment, we're going to log in, and we're going to take a look. So all of you now should be able to see my Aerohive screen here. Now, as soon as you log in, you're going to get the dashboard. Now, again, this is a select Aerohive license piece only. This dashboard is incredible. There's a ton of information here, and we're really going to dive into that visibility that you see. So first and foremost, at the top bar here, you're going to see the connection status. It says we have 15 connected devices. Now, if we divert our eyes to the middle here, you're going to see that we have 18 total devices loaded in. So that means we must have some outages, and we're going to look at what that looks like here in a little bit. As you can see here, 11 of our 13 APs are connected, 4 of our 5 switches are connected. You can see what total apps. We can dive deeper into what type of applications have been on, how many clients are currently connected, any rogues, any alarms, and any rogue APs. It's a quick snapshot of what's happening on your network. If we go a little lower, you're going to see the timeline or the time bar. Okay, and this allows you to go back in time and see a historical record of everything. So right now, we're looking at the past couple hours of the Cerdant family of networks. So this is actually multiple buildings we're looking at right now. If I change this to 24 hours, we're going to see the entire past 24 hours and what happened on our network. Specifically seeing that there was over 18 gigs of data, 220 unique clients, both wired and wireless. We're going to see what type of applications, either web services, streaming media, networking pieces. We're going to see what applications specifically were run, let it be Amazon Web Services, iTunes, Facebook, how much data. And if we were to click on these, we can see what devices use that data. And we'll go back and look at that here in a moment. We can see specific devices and what they're doing and what they've done on the network. Now, if we go here, this is actually my device. And we're going to click on that so as not to embarrass anybody. And here's a 24-hour snapshot of what my device has done on our wireless network. We can see that it's a Windows 10 laptop. We see what IP address it pulled, how long it's been connected to specific devices. And as you can see here, here's again that timeline of different radio signals I had, my average noise to floor ratio, what AP I was connected to at that time, what switch I was then going through after going through a specific AP, how much data I used at this moment. You're getting a lot of historical data. Now, I would be remiss to say that there are a lot of customers that we have out there that spend a lot of money on applications and products to get this information, and it's built into your wireless solution. So just by having Aerohive access points on your network, you're going to have your fingertips at this data as long as, again, you do have a licensed product. From here, we're going to get to see what access points I connected to, what my signal looked like, how long I was attached to there, if I associated, authenticated, and did I pull proper DHCP, right? We can see that I'm currently, the one I'm connected to, I'm on 5 gigahertz, what channel I'm on, that I'm currently using an 802.11 AC radio. And last but not least, here's a map, and we're going to dive deeper into the map function. There's a map with the exact location of the access point that I'm actually currently connected to. And I say current because actually in this webinar, we are doing this all wirelessly. So again, this is one device. This is also where you can troubleshoot something. I'd be remiss to also talk about that. How often have you had a fellow employee or a client or an end user tell you I couldn't connect this morning, or I had a lot of wireless issues this morning, and it's now 6 hours later. When that happens, you want to just yell or scream or strangle them because you can't help them 6 hours ago in the past. But with Aerohive in this timeline, we can look back at what a specific user was doing at that time. And we're going to dive deeper in as we go through the different menus. We can see past tools and past errors using that time bar. And from that time bar, we can go back in time and see, oh, you were putting in the wrong password. Here, let me fix it for you. So again, having this data at your fingertips becomes very valuable. Now, specifically, if we were saying, somebody, we go back to the application piece, we want to see who was using Exchange, right? Let's say this is something more advanced. You see somebody is streaming Netflix on your network, and they're doing it on the employee wireless. If you were to click on that, and again, we could use our time bar and see when it happened. We could see when the biggest spike was, and it's going to alter our data and tell us what operating system was currently running, where those connections were happening based on our different users, and what PCs and devices were currently accessing that data at that time. Again, a lot of data at your fingertips. This is that visibility I was talking about. You have control and you have access to these different things. And finally, you can see usage per AP, and you can see what radio people are connecting to. That'd be 5 gigahertz or 2.4. Now, the one thing you're going to see is more people connect to 5 gigahertz. And this is something that I was talking about before, is that in an environment and being able to run that dual 5 gigahertz radio, more people are going to connect to 5 gigahertz than they're going to connect to 2.4. Now, in our environment, we're even slightly skewed because we have some older devices that we do testing with that are only 2.4. So even though we're a 2-to-1 ratio, in most cases, you're always going to see a 2-to-1, sometimes 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, 5 gigahertz to 2.4. Now, before we leave this screen, all of this data, again, is for our entire company. But our entire company isn't located in just one office or one floor or one building. So we can actually view data based on a specific office. This is our latest office. In this office, we produce 5.8 gigs, and there's 4 access points associated in the past 24 hours, or we can shrink it and go to the past 4 hours. We can go to one of our remote users in Seattle and see their data. Or we can go to Boston. And everything that you're doing in all these different environments, from one centralized location, you can manage and deploy your products. If you're in retail and you have stores all across the United States or the globe, you can see what each store is doing on an individual basis. You have visibility at your fingertips without having to log into a specific controller or a secondary product or another visibility tool. It's all right here in Aerohive with you. So let's get back to our global view. Let's go over to monitoring. Oh, before I move on, actually, all of these pieces, this is all beautiful, GUI. You can download these, or you can actually generate a PDF with this information. So if you needed to present to somebody, you want to show them how much data is passing through Netflix, so you can maybe get a new company policy to where Netflix is no longer used on the employee wireless. You can turn this into a PDF, show the past 24 hours or past week, and get that deployed for you. There's also additional reports related to PCI DSS in the sense that there's certain parts of the code that are specific for multi-factor authentication, and when you run this, it will let you know if your wireless piece meets the current standards of PCI. We also have some wireless intrusion prevention history for rogues and some other statistics. Now with monitoring, again, this is that visibility piece. Now we're looking at the entire Cerdant family. And actually before this webinar, I created some errors so we can have some fun with this. First and foremost, you're going to see things that are in red, right? These red stop sign type signatures are going to be the ones that are currently disconnected. So from a global view, I can see what devices are disconnected and what's going on with them. From that view, if I say, oh, my production Adam Josh's office is down, where was that located again? I know where it was. Now, the reason why this one's down is because I unplugged it. So if somebody were to go in there and try to troubleshoot it, they'd see that it's disconnected and it's gone. We can see when it was last disconnected, when it was last seen, and we can gather other information of when it was last configured, what it was doing. Okay, but since this one isn't online, we can have some fun with this and really dive into some configuration pieces. Let's go and find some devices that are online. Now, with devices that are online, the next thing over you're going to see is your configuration audit. Now, we have two devices here. This switch here is currently up to date. Its config is up to date. Everything is working with that piece. But this one has an audit signature. If we click on that, it's going to show what changes have been made to either its network policy or its device template. And it's going to tell us what changes would be made if we were to push an update. So when you could hear, I could see I was doing some SNMP testing, just generating, again, some pieces so we could have for this demonstration. Now, if I looked at these and said, none of these have to do with this switch, none of these have to do with anything in this environment, I'm going to go ahead and ignore them, which is something I could easily do, and it's going to say that everything is good to go and it's fine. We're not going to do that for now. The next piece, we'll check on an audit for this AP. Now, with the AP, you can see that we have a few more things. Again, it's going to show SNMP changes. Those were switch changes, but it was changes to a network policy that contains both switches and access points. The last thing you'll see, though, is this thing called Delta. Now, this is with your access points. It's going to show you the exact configuration change that is going to send your access points. This is literally the CLI that will be sent. Now, let's say this is a change I want to go through. Okay, we're going to close that, keep a checkbox on our access point here, and the simplicity of, again, deploying network changes is just as simple as clicking an update button. Now, we would have more options here. We can send a brand new configuration, which would cause a reboot. We can upgrade its Hive OS, which would cause a reboot, or we can just send the Delta. And the changes that are in this Delta configuration actually won't cause a reboot. We'll go ahead and click that. You'll see that our deployment has been successful. It's queued up. And then you're going to see the status bar go through. Now, again, we're not right there. You know, this device can be anywhere. Now, this one obviously is in the office. It's actually not too far away from me, right? But we can see it go through. Now, this would be a device that we had failed. I actually sent an update, and then I unplugged the device so we can get a failure there. You're always going to see these. It's always going to give you feedback. If it didn't get a complete configuration on it done, you're going to know which device failed. If update was successful, you're going to see when it was successful. And again, there's a lot of data here. Let it be how many clients are connected, how long it's been up, the MAC address, its location, which we'll get deeper into, serial number model, version of the OS that's running, a lot of data at your fingertips. Again, all of this can then be done by location. So currently this is all of Cerdant. If I go back to our new office deployment, you can see there's just these devices in the new office, okay, these access points, and the one I unplugged. We had in our old office where we still have some backbone equipment, you're going to see more devices. And again, still the device that I unplugged. All of this at your fingertips you can look at from a location standpoint or from a global standpoint. Let's go ahead and get all of Cerdant active there again. Now we kind of dived into the client piece. We dove into the application piece. I really want to show the ease of how you would manage these devices. So we're going to skip maps for now and go to configuration. Again, everything is done by a network policy and a device template. These are the two foundational pieces for you to deploy something in your environment. Now, as you can see here, we have multiple network policies. Let it be the home of our Vice President of Sales or the home of our CEO or our production environment versus our lab training environment, our lab office environment, or some additional training for somebody at home. All of these different policies can be adjusted one at a time and deployed at one AP or numerous APs. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of our lab policies here. So in a policy, a network policy, is where you have control over all of your settings, your network settings. Let it be DNS if you're using something specific, specific Hive settings, let it be management settings, network settings, QoS or classifier maps, which is a more advanced setting in the Aerohive ecosystem. But you can do different things with your network piece. You could also, this is where you would control your SSIDs and VLANs. Upon stacked on top of that network policy is going to be a device template. Now, a device template is how you control a specific device. So a network policy may maintain, let's say, 150 different devices, mixture of access points, switches, across multiple buildings, right? So let's say you have 3 offices, they run the same SSID, they're running PPSK, they run similar VLANs, it's kind of a uniform piece, and they're all connected via MPLS. That can all be under one network policy. So if you make a massive policy change, everybody gets affected by that. But maybe each switch needs a slight different configuration, or each AP needs slight radio configuration changes based on the model of AP that it is. You then stack multiple templates inside that policy. So we'll take a look at a template here. From a template standpoint, this is where you would control your radio. Now, this is just a lab policy where we were playing around with some stuff. This is outdoor, and actually an outdoor access point, as you can see a picture of it there. From here, you can go through and control if it's doing backhaul mesh or channel switching or high density. You can manipulate the radio policy or the radio template for a specific device that is stacked upon that network policy. Again, all this control is at your fingertips. Now, what I said before, that these devices have the ability to make slight changes, the best way to visually see that is going to be these power bars and this floor bar. In this scenario, we told it that can never exceed a maximum of 14 dBm and never go below 5 dBm. In that scenario, these devices are going to sit and decide, if we put 2 of these next to each other, they're going to talk to each other and figure out somewhere between 14 and 5 where they're going to control their power. Likewise with channels and other things of that sort. Once we've done, let's say we made our changes, we've decided that we wanted to bump this up to 150 users maximum, okay? And we save that. When you go to deployment, which this device currently is offline, but when you go to deployment, this is where, again, you can pick all of the devices under the network policy. You could pick none of the devices under the network policy. You can pick and choose who gets this change, who gets this policy. If we mosey on over to maps, this is where a great opportunity where you can kind of see some of the visibility and where you can control where your devices are and get an idea where your devices are. So if we go to our 5747 Perimeter Drive address, we click on our new office. This is actually a floor plan. And you're going to see, we can see where our access points are currently located. Now, normally, a building our size, we do overkill a little bit with access points because we do plug some in for testing, such as this Aerohive Atom. Now, with the Aerohive Atom, you're going to notice these green lines. That's because, again, they're controlled by a mesh, that mesh protocol, right? That Aerohive Mobility Routing Protocol. The green represents the mesh redundant connectivity between that atom and the access point that it was using as for its backhaul mesh system. From here, this is where you can name and control where things are located, and that's why, based on, let's say, what room or what office I'm in, it showed that I was connected to this access point here, which is called our main kitchen access point. From here, which we don't use this software particularly for our heat diagram, but you can develop a heat diagram based on your setup. You can build in your walls, you do different things, and kind of see if you were to simulate adding another access point, what it would look like to your environment. Finally, what we're going to step into is the tools and that diagnostic piece. So, again, generating some stuff so we can have some pieces for today. This is what, again, that timeline piece looks like, okay? So if at 8 this morning somebody told me they had issues, we can roll back the clock and find that device and know that at 8 o'clock this morning or at 9:25, it was a passphrase mismatch, and that's what the user was doing. This could be, if the user comes back, a week later, we could pull the same data. And it's that useful piece of information that's going to help you troubleshoot. Now, this is a very basic one. There's so many other errors that can pop up and alarms and things that can help you diagnose a problem, okay? But in this scenario, just to generate some quick ones that we can see, we did a passphrase mismatch. I can't tell you again how many times, I know at least it happens to me, and I know it happens to our users. and our customers where people always report things after the fact. Some additional things I want to show before we finally wrap up is the ability to control. Now, a lot of people are looking here and they're saying everything is just this GUI. What can we do beyond that? And one thing that I would be remiss to show is that actually, specifically with access points or switches, you can also dive in and do additional control pieces. So let's first go into this access point. Again, we know where it's at. We can see different pieces here. We can go outside of that template. Let's say we build a base AP250 template, but I want to do more. I want to specifically control this access point. I want that control, that management plane to be mine. And you can. You can control from here which SSIDs are on for this AP. You can control what channels it can or cannot use. You can control its exact power level, or if it's going to be used as a sensor, or for backhaul mesh, or just for clients. And you can manipulate both radios easily how you see fit. So it doesn't have to just be by a template. You can manipulate and go into each individual piece and see exactly what it's doing. You can also SSH into a piece, and this is a really cool security feature that Aerohive has. So one of the things with Aerohive, when I say that advanced security piece, as soon as an Aerohive gets plugged in and it phones home, it immediately wipes all its default credentials and goes to a master credential you set in your Aerohive piece. This is even before it accepts a full network policy. If you have no network policy set up for it, as soon as it phones home, it loses the default credentials. Now, any device that's across the world, you're thinking, if I want to be able to SSH into it, or I want to be able to gain access to it, to do that, I have to pinhole my firewall. I have a VPN, and that's not the case. If remote SSH or SSH availability is turned on, these access points and these switches are always phoning home. Simpler to log me in. You can create an SSH session, use Aerohive as a proxy, and access your device through an encrypted connection, allowing you to make changes. Now, one last cool thing I'll show, and again, that visibility and that control, just because you don't have a controller, you have true control over these devices. Just because you're not in the same room with them, you can access devices and check things. So one of the things I'm going to check is this device here is actually the main piece for our Aerohive Atoms. It's where our atoms, our lab atoms, connect back. Now, I just connected to this device, and I'm going to be able to do full CLI through this device and check in. Sorry. Check in on our backhaul mesh and see what it's doing. So in this scenario, I can see that currently no atoms are connected. If an atom was connected, we'd get a feedback and it'd say total neighbors 1 and it'd show us what channel it's connected on. This is the only way that you can fully see if an atom is passing traffic through the backhaul mesh. You don't have to be in the same room. You don't have to be on the same network. You don't have to be anywhere. You can do it all from this centralized management piece. This access point, in theory, could be halfway around the world, but I can issue this command and see the results and have a full understanding of what it's doing in my environment. And that's something, and one of the big reasons why we chose Aerohive. As a remote MSP, we want to make sure that we can control our devices and help our users control those devices. So having said that, we're going to go back to the last bit of our presentation here. And before we wrap up, I want to make sure to cover two quick things before we get to questions. The first being, obviously, everything we showed today was really just scratching the surface of the Aerohive product. One thing, though, a part of that product, a big piece of that product, are the Aerohive models. Now, obviously, we didn't cover any of them. You heard me mention a few different names, such as the Atom, which I know a lot of people are excited about. I said an AP250, which is a Wave 2 AP. But part of the reason is I could spend a whole day covering the new 802.11ax devices, all the Wave 2 devices, the pluggable mesh AP30 Atoms, their outdoor devices. This is a whole nother conversation. But the biggest thing to take away from the Aerohive models is that regardless of what type of environment you have, there is a device that would fit and meet the needs that you're having in your environment. Let it be, again, a pluggable access point the size of a large glade plug-in, or a full, weather-resistant or weatherproof, waterproof, heat and cold-resistant device such as the AP1130 that you could put in a marina and could take salt water all day. Right? There is a solution for you. including the cutting-edge 802.11ax devices. The last thing is being able to manage that. Now, just basically covering, we do have 2 deployment options, and we do have 2 management options. So the first is our basic deployment, which is under 10,000 square feet. Yeah, that's 10,000 square feet, apologies. And this is for really that small business. And this is one where we don't have a predictive model. It's for small environments, basic setup, right? We understand that some small office environment where you have 15 users, 30 users, 40 users, and you would only need 2 access points. In that scenario, you probably don't need to run a predictive model, right? So we have a non-predictive model option where we can help you deploy that. We also have our advanced deployment, which is for all business sizes, and this is where a predictive model or full wireless site survey can be happened upon request. We do all configuration pieces beyond the basic, the advanced setups, the nitty-gritty and the deep cuts in the Aerohive toolbox, and then you get 30 days of support. And then finally, beyond those deployment services, we offer monthly management. We have a basic, which is for general wireless support and management, and an advanced, which covers 24/7 support and monitoring, and advanced features of class modifiers, PPSK, rogue mitigation, application control, things of that sort. Again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to get a brief demo of Aerohive with us to kind of see what the management platform looks like, and for taking the time to join us and get a view and a taste of what Aerohive can do and understand why we as a company chose Aerohive and added it to our portfolio. Having said that, if there are any questions, I'd like to see if we can help anybody and answer those.
Yeah, Sam, I think Lee has one question that got sent in via the Q&A for you to handle, so he should have that there for you.
Yeah, so the question just passed me is, do I need to create any firewall rules to use Hivemanager's features? The answer is, well, if you restrict your outbound access, you will need to open up and make sure that your devices can, obviously hit DNS and have, the couple ports that Aerohive needs to phone home, the encrypted ports it uses to get access to the Hivemanager. But you do not need any inbound ports to get all those remote access through SSH, through the CLI access that I showed briefly, to take over or to send configuration updates to your devices. That's all done through stateful connections. So it first phones home, and based on that connection where it's phoning home to the Hivemanager client is where your changes then write in on that established connection. So in most scenarios, if you're open outbound, you're good to go. It would only be if you do some very strict filtering on, let's say, your management network or your LAN network outbound, where your access points or switches may live, you may need to do some pinholing on the outbound connection.
Awesome. I have another one here that was sent in via the Q&A. It is, have you noticed any issues with the newer Aerohive models playing nicely with the older ones? So I guess generation to generation problems. Sam, have we seen any of that in testing or deployment?
No, the only time that I would see anything like that, or that we've seen anything like that, is using the new Aerohive APs. And that's really just making sure that you're on the proper firmware. The services that a device like that's very new and very cutting edge in the Aerohive portfolio, you just have to make sure that the surrounding access points are running the latest and greatest firmware that supports those devices to connect to each other. We haven't seen anything beyond that. As long as you're on the proper firmware, we haven't seen any real issues with devices being able to work together and connect together. Obviously, there are some older devices that could be entering end of life or don't have support for certain firmwares, and that could create an issue. But with any of those, we've used AP130s, which are multiple years old, and brought them in with brand new Atoms, AP150s and 250s, and they use that dynamic protocol. They use all the protocol pieces. They communicate with each other, and the Atoms just also seamlessly just join in, which those are only a couple months old as of right now.
Awesome. We have another one here about the advanced features, and this is probably more probably a post-call follow-up, but I'll ask about it anyway, is do we have any documentation that kind of explains the concepts of the advanced features more, like the PPSK and the things like that? So Sam, I don't know if you want to touch on any of those things as we wrap up, but that's probably more, it sounds like more of a documentation question, but I'll let you, decide if there's anything worth chatting about on that topic.
I mean, the big thing I'll say, and again, that would be more of a one-on-one, and I'd love to take that question and have a side conversation with an individual and really dive into those different pieces. The big thing that I will discuss is that PPSK, because it is very specific to Aerohive. While, the class modifiers and the application control, there are other devices that have similar features. PPSK is really kind of a lone feature that is very specific to Aerohive. On an advanced feature level, what that is it bypasses the fact that you have just one passphrase for all employees. Now, obviously, you could do something with radius, right? But with that, that's more management on an individual and managing your radius server and your cert and things of that nature. And what happens when a vendor comes in, right? A vendor, do they just connect to your guest? Does that vendor need access to your employee network or to your production network? And what does that vendor authenticate with? With PPSK, you can give everybody a dedicated passphrase. If somebody were to leave or be fired, you can remove that passphrase and remove that user from your network without any issue. You can limit how many devices that passphrase is good for. Let it be one or more. Right? Maybe your CEO, you want to let them have 3 devices because they have a tablet, a laptop, and a cell phone. But your general user, you want to limit it to 1. You can put a timestamp on it so that vendor, that maybe an auditor or an accountant that needs to connect to that employee wireless and gain access to a very specific server, you can limit them and say that this person can connect and has access to this VLAN. They can connect for 4 hours for a production network, and then that PPSK is gone. They can only connect 1 device, and they get access to this device. It really gives you some control and that advanced security piece while not needing to have just 1 PPSK. Specifically, again, if somebody leaves on bad terms, having to go through and update every single laptop or every single cell phone if you don't use an enterprise or radius solution can be very tedious. So PPSK is a great meld of not having to manage so much on the back end and being able to have visitors or vendors come in and use specific resources, but also, again, deactivate somebody's rights quite quickly. Other than that, though, a lot of those, I'd say, beyond that, Kara, we'd want to have a sidebar conversation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, and that's the remainder of our questions really are very environment specific, and I think that's probably the biggest message with wireless is, we can cover it in a general way, but so much of the questions are really specific to environment, and that is a good thing. It just, it kind of really speaks to the differences in environments and the scalability of the solution. So. Everybody, we will wrap up at this point, but thank you again for taking the time to join us. Sam has his contact information up here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to him directly if you have any follow-up questions. He wouldn't provide his contact information if he didn't want you to reach out to him. Obviously, if you're an existing Cerdant customer, feel free to contact any number of people on your support team or your sales team. And if you are not a current Cerdant customer, you can reach us at sales@cerdant.com for any follow-up questions. But we will be making the webinar available for listening post-event as well if you need to share within your organization. So again, thank you for the time and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.